You're listening to Dateline Latin America, Tear Gas and Tango with
Joe Goldman, 37 years with ABC News, then with UPI, with The Village Voice, and many other.
And me, Daniel Schweimler, originally from London, formerly of the BBC, 19 years, and more recently with Al Jazeera English across Latin America.
They'll be sitting at a kitchen table in Buenos Aires talking about their journalistic adventures across the region, covering earthquakes, flooding and fires, talking to presidents, charlatans, sports stars and other newsmakers. In short, journalism and the state of the world.
Hey Joe, well that was a surprise, wasn't it? Caught everybody on the hop.
It sure did. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we knew something was going to happen. You
Yes.
don't amass thousands of troops in the Caribbean with your best aircraft carriers and all those, helicopters and drones and planes and threaten, kill 110 people who you accuse of being narco traffickers and then not use the bulk of your forces. You do something. But I think that's the nature of the kidnapping, and I think we should call it a kidnapping because that's what it was. The nature of the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores, his wife, caught us all by surprise.
Absolutely. Yeah, kidnapping. We are not exactly Maduro freaks here, to say the least. We've never defended Maduro, especially since the last stolen election. I guess that's the two things, some of the things they have in common, Maduro and Trump. They've both tried to steal elections.
For sure, yeah.
And I guess Trump envies the fact that Maduro was able to accomplish it.
I mean, he still has some support, I guess, but 6-7 million people do not leave your country if you're doing things right. And 6-7 million people have left, it's about, a quarter of the population have left the country. And that is almost unheard of. I mean, it happened in Syria, but then they had a huge civil war going on. This was, political and economic. People streaming across those borders. I've been up there, the Brazilian border, the Colombian border, and watched them coming across in huge numbers.
Argentina, Chile. It became an issue, actually, in the presidential election in Chile. The 700,000 Venezuelans that were all over Chile, and that became an issue in the election.
And we've got Venezuelan restaurants, we've got Venezuelan cafes all over Buenos Aires. They've been very well accepted generally. There were protests in Buenos Aires when the news came out. Many Venezuelans going to the Obelisco for what they called a happiness rally in support of the US action and the fact that Maduro's gone. And then others, mostly parties of the left, and some Venezuelans went to the embassy, the Venezuelan embassy in Buenos Aires, to protest against the US action. So split opinions, but I wonder those 6-7 million Venezuelans around Latin America, around the world, obviously watching, waiting, deciding, do we go back? What's going to happen next? And the truth is, no one knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I'm in contact with my niece who lives in Buenos Aires, who's Venezuelan, and she was at neither of those rallies, as probably most of the Venezuelans were, and much more concerned about the safety of her family and friends in Caracas. Somebody who has not taken sides, but certainly left the country for economic reasons.
I mean, it does seem as though the military action is done and dusted. Those couple of hours they spent in Caracas shooting dead, it now seems 50, 60 people, including 30 or so Cubans who were guarding President Maduro, shot dead. But some things were, areas were bombed as well, obviously to create a distraction, to lessen the Venezuelan defences. But the US are saying that's it. As long as Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, is she president, vice president? I mean, they said she's going to be president. She's saying not, that Nicolas Maduro is still president. He's appeared in court in New York to say, soy inocente, soy todavía el presidente de Venezuela. Where are we at? We don't know. The only one who knows is possibly Donald Trump, and it's not even clear he knows what he's going to do next.
Yeah, the judge in the case, by the way, Judge Hellerstein, is a 92, almost 93-year-old magistrate who, according to friends of mine who have worked in that court, they have to show him the way to sit in his judicial seat. he is the one deciding about that.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, yes.
So
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
I mean, the other big surprise after the raid on the presidential palace was the fact that Trump and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth decide that Delcy Rodriguez, this kind of firebrand vice president, oil minister, is going to be the one to fill Nicolas Maduro's shoes. The obvious choice for most people would have been Maria Corina Machado, who recently given the Nobel Peace Prize. Why did she? And she's of the right, she's of the opposition, she has been for many, many years now. She would be the obvious, at least interim president. But Trump very openly, very publicly said she hasn't got the support. Don't want her.
And the Washington Post, in its edition today, Monday, did say that Trump said to aides that she should not be the new leader of Venezuela in any way, shape, or form, because she didn't offer to give her Nobel Prize to Donald Trump.
So he's taken it personally.
Yes.
Which is just bizarre, isn't it, how politics is being done. But I think, I mean, what do you think was the reasoning behind? I mean, people have talked about various reasons behind this raid on Venezuela. The oil is an obvious one. I think it's much more to assert US dominance in the region, or reassert US dominance in the region. We talked about the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, now talking about the Donroe Doctrine of 2026, asserting US dominance in Latin America and its sphere of influence. So it does seem, I mean, who in their right mind, which president in their right mind would defy the US now knowing that he's saying, well, Colombia, I don't like the way they're running things here. We might invade Colombia next. We might invade Mexico next. I don't know what Claudia Sheinbaum, the president there, is saying. And then the cartels have got too much control. Who's next, you know?
Yeah. No, it's like when you have a maniac running the whole operation, in some ways, the fear of that maniac does a job on everybody.
Really, yeah. And they've already proven that Latin American countries are not powerful enough, or anyone's powerful enough, to stand up to this aggression. I mean, we had it with the US sending migrants back to their countries of origin, or sometimes not even their countries of origin, shoving them in jails in El Salvador. But we had it there. People were protesting. Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, protested and then had to take the migrants back.
Yeah.
The tariffs being imposed, people protested and then had to accept what the US were imposing.
Yes.
We had it with Brazil, Donald Trump interfering with the prosecution against the former president Jair Bolsonaro.
Using tariffs as a means of protest.
Exactly, yeah. And Lula did protest, but, you know, very bravely in a way. But Brazil is a bigger, more powerful country than most others in the region. Got away with it to a certain degree. But really, it's Donald Trump deciding what goes on in the region. And, you know, anyone who defies him will be threatened.
A few things are happening that I think are a backdrop to this whole story. And that backdrop, what happened around New Year's this year, even if Trump had this as being part of his plan, I think it advanced that plan. And what am I talking about? Well, first of all the polling recently has shown Trump's support has gone down to 35, 36%, record lows. The amount of people consulted saying that they didn't support Trump has gone up over 60%. This is unheard of, especially in the first year, the supposed honeymoon period of a president. January 1st, the Obamacare provisions, the health care provisions that were like subsidies for many, many millions of people in the United States, ended. What happened? Those people received will receive their new bills with 40 to 100% increases. It will especially affect the so-called red states, the states that have supported Trump. Why? Because those governors are not in a position to take on those subsidies, wherein wealthier states like New York, Maryland, California, Washington State, they are taking on those costs or part of those costs. that was a measure that is going to really, Trump has said for 8 years now that Obamacare should be over with, and he's ready with a plan put in place to replace it. That plan has never been released, and as of January 1st, it's become a huge issue.
He's also got other issues, obviously, Epstein files.
Absolutely.
This is a huge distraction. Nothing like a foreign war or foreign military incursion to distract attention away from your troubles at home. Thinking here in Argentina in 1982, towards the end of the military regime, the military dictatorship here, they were struggling to hold on to power. What better thing to do than invade some nearby islands, that you claim as your own, the Malvinas, Falklands. Nice little war, which Argentina obviously lost in the end, but it was a distraction. They had thousands of people who had been complaining about the regime out on the streets, waving flags. Patriotism reigned until they lost and under difficult circumstances had to stand down. But it prolonged their time in office.
And the other thing was, in England, you had a Thatcher government that was not doing too well, and the war was like a ring on her finger. It was perfect.
Oh yeah, I mean they in the islands themselves, they named a street after her and put up a statue, I think. So they were delighted. The military were delighted because it meant they could justify huge spending on weapons and all the rest of it. Military spend a lot of their time in the military without fighting wars. What they want to do is fight a war because that's what they're trained for, and they got to do that. And I guess the U.S. military, we could see the head of the armed forces, the guy making the speech at the press conference, just so proud of the fact that the US operation in Caracas went so well. Which has to be said, as a military operation, it did.
Yeah.
Not a single US soldier lost, not a single piece of machinery lost. They didn't talk about the fact they'd killed most of the presidential guard. That didn't come out then, that came out later. But yeah, it was a tactic which has been well used in the past and works in the short term.
Another thing in the U.S. is something that I've been reading, which I absolutely cannot believe. The Jack Smith testimony a week ago in Congress. The transcripts were released by the Republican majority on New Year's Eve, which is always when you release things to end up nowhere.
So Jack Smith had investigated Trump,
yes.
hadn't he? And
he was a federal prosecutor put in place, I believe, in 2021 to investigate Trump's first presidency, and especially the January 6th rebellion and Trump's possible inciting that rebellion. And also, interestingly enough, the classified documents that were discovered in Trump's possession in Mar-a-Lago. And reading the testimony, it is unbelievably damning that Jack Smith, first of all, on the rebellion, on the January 6th riots, not only was that a factor in Trump trying to steal the election, but his calls to different people, his creating of fake electors, is scandalous. It's absolutely scandalous. You can talk about Nicolas Maduro, and there's certainly tremendous evidence about him trying to steal the election in 2024, I believe it was.
I think so, yeah.
Where polls were showing that he was losing 60 to 35, and no results come out, and then suddenly 87% of the population says that they support him, 70%. That was obvious. What we really have not seen yet is how Donald Trump equally tried to steal an election in 2020. And
will he get his comeuppance eventually, Donald Trump? He's broken international law, we believe, firstly by bombing these so-called narco boats in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, and then by going into a sovereign state. All this stuff about it was only an arrest, it was a police action, not a military action. It's crap, basically. So he's broken international law. The trouble is we're in a world now where nobody is going to even criticise. I mean, I'm looking at my own Prime Minister Keir Starmer's response to this whole debacle, which was quite frankly pathetic. Showed people will be judged by their response to the breaking of these laws, these international laws. We're going to wait till the facts come out before I say anything.
Yeah.
We know that there was a military raid on sovereign territory to arrest the president of another country, who was then whisked away to New York. We know that much. What is there? What facts? What more facts do we need? Okay, he doesn't support Nicolas Maduro. Neither do we. But there's a process that we need to go through, that countries need to go through to judge people. If their elections are fraudulent, then the Organization of American States, the United Nations, that's what they're there for. International courts can judge these people.
And with the recent elections of right-wing leaders throughout the hemisphere, the OAS would have had a tremendous power to get rid of Maduro. Put tremendous pressure on Maduro, where they haven't in previous years. So, sure, but that would have involved diplomatic work, something that Donald Trump has never done and never will do. The other thing that was shocking about reading these documents of Jack Smith and his prosecution was the documents that were found in his possession, literally stolen, classified documents with national security stops. These were documents which there's a judge who's a pro-Trump judge named Eileen Cannon, federal judge in Florida, who's put an injunction on any of this material coming out in public. So in his testimony, Jack Smith, who is a lifetime legal prosecutor, attorney, Department of Justice attorney, he is answering questions, and many of his the questions about the documents, his answer was, I can't answer that because the judge has put an injunction on any free speech in this case. Now, some of those questions involved, did Donald Trump sell information, once again, classified national security documents to enemy states? And instead of answering no, Jack Smith's answer to the Congress, his sworn testimony, was, I cannot answer that question because the judge in the case has imposed an injunction.
I mean, when a democratically elected leader of a country defies his own country's laws, constitution, judiciary, as Donald Trump is doing, as well as international law, what is the point at which you say this man is now a dictator? He's certainly moving in that direction, if he isn't already.
And I think one of the things that's going on behind the scenes in Washington is that so many of Donald Trump's own Republicans are turning on him.
Yeah.
And that's something that they may not turn on the Venezuela case, but they might turn on the Jack Smith testimony.
Right, okay.
Because they have very big concerns if he is selling classified documents or giving classified documents to Russia, for example.
Right.
They are very concerned if he's hiding the Epstein case. There are plans to bring some of the survivors, as they're called, of the Epstein years to Washington to do protests. He is facing a huge backlash from his own people.
I mean, you wonder how much he cares, or just keep manipulating things to his own advantage while he can.
Well, I think he cared enough to invade Venezuela when he did.
True. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, again, for me, it's the helplessness of institutions in the United States, of the population there, of other countries when we're talking about the possible invasion of Greenland, possible invasion of countries in Latin America, the helplessness of
absolutely.
International bodies like the UN, Organization of American States, and Latin America as a body to do anything about it, apart from to protest loudly, verbally. I mean, I know Gustavo Petro has sent troops to the border with Venezuela because he fears, obviously, more migrants coming across. There could be a big backlash. People who supported Maduro's government now trying to escape any kind of retribution from a new regime, if a new regime is imposed.
That's another 7 million people
could
leaving
be,
the country.
Could be, couldn't it? Could be. So, as well as
Jeez.
the possibility of him being abducted, shot, because, Trump has pretty much threatened him with that. So he's got more troops around him. No, but again, with the Venezuelan military, their president's been abducted in the kind of most brazen fashion possible, yet what have they done? What are they able to do? So the head of the military in Venezuela is still in office. He's still serving Delcy Rodriguez.
Yeah.
So a foreign country has come in, taken his president. What are they able to do? I mean, they're a relatively well-trained force, I imagine, loyal to the regime, if not to Nicolas Maduro anymore. What are the options open to them? What do they attack? Do they start attacking ships in the Caribbean, American ships in the Caribbean? Because then obviously they know that there will be a response, which they won't be able to deal with. So I don't know. I mean, it's
I don't know what they're going to do. I think it's interesting today in the court, Maduro pleaded not guilty. He's utilizing the same lawyer as Julian Assange used in U.S. courts. Pollock, I believe his name is. Supposedly a very, very good lawyer. See what happens with that. I remember speaking, I don't know if you ever met Teodoro Petkov.
No.
He was candidate for president a few times in Venezuela, a leftist anti-Chavist. Ran against Chavez in one of the elections. I can't remember which one. 2006, I believe it was. From the left. He was an ex-guerrilla when Venezuela had guerrillas back in the 80s, but a brilliant guy who ran the magazine called Tal Cual. It was a really good magazine. He was an economist by trade and a very interesting guy. And I remember talking to him because even back in 2006, there were accusations about Chavez and drugs. And he said something that I thought was really interesting at the time. He said, Venezuela, drugs, it just isn't happening here. Our drug is petroleum. Oil is our drug. And the way that you steal money is not by running cocaine from Colombia through Venezuela. That's not the way you make money. The way you make money is stealing off the oil and gas.
Right.
And the way that PDVSA was run.
And it was, I went to Venezuela, I've been several times to Venezuela. The first time I went was in the early 90s when the old guard was still in power. It was between, Chavez, I think, was still in prison for the failed coup before he came back.
I believe that was.
That's right, yeah. So I went shortly after that, and then he became president a while afterwards in elections. And I remember then the corruption, the levels of corruption in the old guard, the oil was flowing, but it was more expensive to buy a bottle of bottled water, simply because, a country where it rains a lot, we've got the highest waterfall in the world, because nothing was being put into the infrastructure.
Yeah.
The roads were in a disastrous state, but the rich could buy 4x4s. The schools weren't working, but you sent your kids off to school abroad, or had an international school built in Caracas. The rich were stinking rich on the oil money, all about the oil.
Yeah.
Because Venezuela was a backwater until the 1920s, until the oil was discovered. And then this wealth came in, but it benefited very few. So I remember when I went there in the early 90s for the BBC, we were going around to the shanty towns and looking at some of these schemes and just asking that question, why with such wealth is there such discontent in the country? Why is this kind of rebel, left-wing military guy got so much support? And it was partly because of that. And these are the same people who want to come back, the Machados, the Leopoldo Lopez's, who did very well under the old regime. And, but there are people of the left, there are trade unions, there is a big force in Venezuela that wants neither the military or the disaster that was Nicolas Maduro or the old guard, the Machado, coming back,
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a tricky one. It's a country split many different ways with Colombian ELN rebels, in Venezuela, other forces, in the jungle, and there are drug traffickers, certainly, maybe not through the government, but using Venezuela as a transit point, but as you say, not to the extent of other countries. So oil is...
Venezuela, during the 90s, when you were there, and I visited also, you would get gas for, 7 cents a gallon? it was incredibly cheap to buy gas. So you would have these cars, some of them shipped from the U.S., these 1950s Oldsmobiles with huge fins, that they were cars that you would start filling up gas, and if you left the engine running, it would be it would never stop. Just gas guzzlers, as we call them. After the U.S. in the 70s had the problems with gas prices going through the roof, naphtha prices, they decided to sell a lot of their old vehicles. Where to? Venezuela.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
And it was great to see some of those old vehicles again, those Pontiacs and other cars. But Venezuela ran off of petroleum.
Yeah, so it is a polarized country, I think, for that reason. So, and I was there in 2014, the year after Hugo Chavez died. Maduro been in office for that 1 year, and everybody we spoke to, the supporters and those who were against him, were saying he can't last, he won't last. It was 2014, so in a way he's done well to last as long as he does, as he has. Okay, millions have left. 2014, it was when protesters, anti-Maduro protesters, were putting barricades up on the streets. They were blocking roads. Pro-government militias were coming out and shooting people, and then the demonstrators were fighting back with catapults or whatever they could find. And there were a number of people killed, a number of people arrested. And when we were shot at one stage when we were filming, or they were shooting nearby as we were filming. But he lasted, you know. And everyone was telling us that what he was doing, he had the military and the police on his side. He would give everybody a turn, all different regiments, different divisions, a turn on the borders with Colombia, with Brazil, where a huge amount of smuggling goes on. Again, the oil, quite often. Yeah. Oil smuggled across the border. You had your time at the border, you could make a lot of money, enough to retire on. So he had the support. He bought the support of a lot of the military. And people in the shanty towns, people, you know, the poorer people of Venezuela, they did all right out of him. There were schemes in these you know, poorer areas, health schemes. You know, fridges were distributed. You know, so there was certainly support there among a certain part of society.
And we should mention that Maduro came from a working class family and was a bus driver. Every time you go into a bus in South America, you should think about that. Yes. This man could someday be president, which is interesting because Milei's father was also a bus driver,
I didn't know that.
Although he became the owner of the bus company.
Right.
We won't go into that. He's somebody who worked his way up, being in the Congress as a Chavista. I should say that I have not seen or heard of anything that proves his connection to drug running. It will have to be given in court. What we can say is that the ex-president of Honduras, who was convicted in a U.S. court of running 400 million in cocaine through his country in a deal with, among others, Chapo Guzman, was given a 45-year sentence in a U.S. federal court, and that was pardoned. He was pardoned by Donald Trump. So to say that Trump cares about the drug influence in the Venezuelan situation kind of loses its
He was questioned
strength.
about that at his press conference in Mar-a-Lago, and he said, well, you know, he was a good man, the former Honduran president, who has the support of his people, and we know that because the party he belonged to has just won the elections, which Donald Trump said, you know, was the only party that he would accept in power. So,
that's right. He threatened the people that if they did not vote for that candidate, they would not receive aid, U.S. aid. Once again, we experienced that in Argentina too.
Yeah, so I think this, because we don't know what he's going to do next. Until we know what he's going to do, how do the Venezuelan people react, whatever side of the political divide they're on? You know, whether you go back to Venezuela, whether you stay away for a while longer, who knows? I mean, nobody can know until we know what Donald Trump's going to do next. And Donald Trump doesn't know what he's going to do next.
How does Maria Corina Machado react to the fact that after this adventure that Trump pulled off, Delcy Rodriguez is in power?
I know. It's just bizarre.
How does the opposition, which won that election a year and a half ago, how do they react?
So I think we're going to have to wait and see. Well, it's a subject we will return to, I'm sure, many times. I'm just keen to know whether the Venezuelans who run the coffee shop that I go to get my beans are going to be there. You know, are they going to go back to Venezuela? I'm going to nip out and get some coffee beans and ask them what they think.
I saw an interview with a Venezuelan in Buenos Aires, and they asked him if he planned to return, and his answer was, "I'm here with 13 members of my family, many of whom get a university education for free in Argentina. We're not returning right now."
And the football's better here as well. They're not very good at football in Venezuela.
Right.
So there's a lot of reasons to stay.
The baseball we can also...
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of reasons to stay. Okay, Joe, speak to you soon.
Okay, take care.